Hello, everyone, and welcome to 4 at 4 Forums. We are live on Facebook, we are live on YouTube, and we are live right here. I am your host, Anita Vogel. Welcome to 4 at 4. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about faith and how it is portrayed in the modern media. And we have a fabulous panel for you, a very diverse panel, someone from every walk of life, someone from the media, someone from the acting world, someone from the theatrical world. So let's take a moment to introduce you to this fabulous panel. I want to begin with our friend Jane Wells from CNBC. Welcome, Jane.
Anita, it is great to see you. And the last time I saw you is when we were able to go inside restaurants, which I guess we never can again.
Yes, and we will be able to do that soon. And I want to mention right off the top, in addition to your amazing news background, you also have a podcast that focuses on Jesus, and that is so interesting. So we're going to talk about that top story tonight, focusing on Jesus. Welcome, Jane.
Thank you.
Next, we want to welcome the fabulous actor, Nicholas D'Agosto. D'Agosto, am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, you did great, Anita. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right. And you are an actor, and you also have something in common with Jane. You have a podcast that focuses on faith. It's called God and Other Delicacies, correct?
Yeah, that's right. It's a weekly discussion about God, belief, non-belief, and other delicate subject matter in an open and welcoming environment. It's not dogmatic, and it really tends to be a chronological version of a person's life story, their spiritual tentpole events that have brought them to where they are today.
Fantastic. I can't wait to delve more into that. And last but not least, we have Michal Dawson Connor. He is a famous opera and gospel singer. He also does some acting, and he's quite funny. I can tell you that too. Welcome,
yeah.
Michal.
It is so nice to be here with you, Anita. Thank you for asking me.
Oh, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. Well, I'm very excited about this panel, and I have given you a brief introduction here, but I want to go around the room, around the screen, and get a little more in depth on who you are. So, Michal, let's start with you. Tell us a little more about yourself.
Well, I am a classical artist, which means I sing classical music like opera, art song, some musical theater, spirituals, gospel, and I also compose. I write for instruments and piano, and the clarinet is one of my favorite instruments. So I do a lot of pieces, and I actually wrote one recently. It's called "The Child of the Walker by Moonlight," and maybe we're going to hear a little bit of that tonight.
Yeah, I think so. I hope so. Well, great. That's a great tease right there. Okay, Jane, I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself, but I need to tell our audience that, we do have a history together. So when I was a college student at USC, I had my first internship at KTTV, Fox 11 in Los Angeles, when it was in Hollywood, even before it was in West LA. And guess who was a reporter there?
Yes, I'm actually Anita's great-grandmother.
She was the youngest reporter at the station.
I was quite young way back when. Thank you. No, I've been a TV news reporter for over 35 years. Covered almost all of it based in Los Angeles. Covered every major story. And so in 2016, most of my career, half of it's been at CNBC. Where I transitioned to business news, although every story is about money. And then a few years ago, I transitioned part-time so that I could do other things like this crazy podcast of mine.
Well, love it. And let's also remember that you were also a Fox News Channel correspondent. And then when you left, I joined the Fox News Channel.
You're following. You're a star. Anita Vogel.
You may be seeing on CNBC next.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks, Jane. And Nicholas, you do a wide body of work. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'm a television, film, and stage actor. I haven't done as much stage as Michal has, but I've done the TV shows you'd know me from are things like Gotham, Masters of Sex, Trial and Error, where I played the lead opposite John Lithgow and Kristen Chenoweth for a couple of seasons. I was in The Office I've done some films like Rocket Science. Election is where I got my start in Omaha, Nebraska, which is where I'm from. Alexander Payne and I actually went to the same all-male Jesuit high school. So that's part of my faith background. And I've been acting since I was quite young, and I got my degree at Marquette University in theater and history. And I've been able to, I turned 40 this last year, and now I've been able to kind of branch out into different creative endeavors. That's been really rewarding.
Wow. Okay. Fantastic. Never would have guessed you were 40. So you're hiding it well, my friend.
I get it a lot. I'll tell you, when you're 40 and you look younger than 40, I'm finding out people are very confused in the acting world.
Yeah, I bet. Okay. Good problem to have.
Yes.
So what is binding you all together is that you all have done some interesting work around the subject of faith. Jane, like you said, you have really been able to branch out from your news career, which I applaud. That is so amazing. And you put together this podcast a couple of years ago called Top Story Tonight. Love the name. And you decided to do something. You started it in 2018, and then this past Christmas, you did something on Jesus. Tell us about that.
Well, I always wanted to retell great events in history as if news media, modern media existed at the time. In other words, if you could retell everything as if social media and fake news existed. And I originally thought the Bible would be great starter material. You know, Adam and Eve hired Johnny Cocker to try and get back into the garden, Jacob and Rachel and Leah, or The Bachelor, all that kind of stuff. And so I wrote this thing about basically Genesis, and podcast companies told me, I went to a couple, they said, great idea, nobody wants God. And then one of them said, but why don't you do the Mayflower? And I thought, well, there's a lot of religion in the Mayflower story, but I didn't, it was such a great idea. I did the Mayflower, I researched it like crazy, wrote the podcast, cast it, blah, blah, blah. And then I was having a conversation in late 2019 with a very wealthy, successful person. We had technical difficulties. The conversation broke down for a few minutes. So we just started talking about passion projects. I tell her this story, and she said, nobody wants God. Well, if you do something on Jesus, I'll help fund it.
Wow.
And so that started the process of writing Top Story Tonight, Jesus, retelling Christmas and Easter as if King Herod is tweeting at 3 a.m. fake news, and the disciples go on Joe Rogan, and they ask them if they smoke weed. I raised more money on Kickstarter. Nicholas D'Augusto thank you very much, was a Kickstarter supporter, and in fact ends up in the mob screaming, crucify him. And I gotta tell you, you are the best, crucify him. You nailed it. You nailed it. And so I just posted episode 3 of Easter today. Next week will be episode 4, the finale. We'll see where it goes from there.
Wow. I love that. Using social media and modern media formats to tell an old story, even something from the Bible. That is such a unique, amazing idea. And you brought along a clip to show us today, I think, right?
I do. I just feel the whole thing brings the story alive in a new way. And so I even decided to add stupid commercials from the first century. If you had bad TV in the first century, what might a commercial sound like? So here's one for the upcoming Gladiator playoffs, voiced by Petros Papadakis. Here it is.
Love it.
This weekend, the Regional Gladiator Championship, the ultimate heavyweight matchup in the octagon, as Babu from Babylon takes on the masked siren. The winner heads to Rome for the Nationals. Come enjoy a day of fighting and death. And sample our new grilled goat and new wine. Kids get in free.
Wow.
I love Petros. He's hilarious. So that's a taste.
That's an attention grabber. That'll stop you in your tracks right there. Real quick, Jane, you mentioned, when you first approached somebody about the idea of, doing a Jesus or, faith related podcast, they kind of ran away. Just quickly, how can we normalize that for a Hollywood audience? I mean, why is Hollywood so afraid of faith, and what can we do to sort of, normalize it for people?
I think the problem, I'm not sure Hollywood is afraid of faith. Hollywood is afraid of Jesus. And the reason why, in my opinion, is because of the way the church in America has become very divisive. And in many ways, the most vocal part of the church in America is against what Hollywood stands for. And I think and Jesus gets lost in the middle of that. So I don't really know how you normalize it. I do think something like this, which is just a bit more interesting and different, might make people listen. But people, you say the word Jesus, and people are afraid.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, a reflection of the church.
Mm-hmm. It makes people very uncomfortable. It is interesting. So Nicholas, you're a successful actor, and you've been an actor for many, many years. What made you decide to take on the topic of faith? You have a podcast, God and Other Delicacies. How did you think of that, and what's behind that?
Yeah, it really kind of came out of a personal need. I had, as I think I mentioned before, I was excited to try my hand at new creative endeavors. Long story short, I fell into the opportunity to start up a show on another friend's platform. It quickly led to me producing my own, but it came out of a sequence of life events that were really defining. So I got married. I had my son with my wife, being the most important part of that experience. And
just in case she's listening,
I mean, she's always, she genuinely cares about me, so she will be listening. And so I want her to know that I genuinely care about her. And so I was raised Roman Catholic. As a very young child, I wanted to be a priest. I have like a t-shirt I drew when I was in first grade. And everybody's drawing astronaut, sports player or something. And I drew a priest when I grew up. And circling back to getting to this age, I had not felt like my home was in organized religion any longer. I have a history degree, and I'm really drawn to the extent of history, the length of, I took it upon myself to really figure out, piece together the timeline of the origin of the universe and the evolution of life. And what started to happen was I started to grow further from the faith that I was raised in, but grow closer to what I was experiencing as a divine experience, as a divine feeling, because it's a unifying feeling for me. It's very harmonious to begin to understand the commonality of all humans. It helped me understand just how commonly integrated we all are, and also how long history is. I mean, we can find art pieces that, farming happened 12,000 years ago. We forget how to put the timeline together. But then what happened was I didn't want to be an atheist, and I didn't know how to be a Catholic anymore. And I really like talking to people. And so what I started to do was I started to just reach out, and I wanted people to tell me about their faith experience. And I have a desire to be emotionally connecting to people, as the other people in this platform all have chosen professions in that regard. Mm-hmm. We all want to be emotionally communicative. And so I started asking people, how and when were you introduced to the idea of God in your life? That's the catalyst question for every single interview. Mm-hmm. And from there, it unfolds in an entirely unique way, depending on the individual. There are an infinite variety of Catholics. There are an infinite variety of atheists and every other faith. I've been very fortunate to have a devout Muslim on my show and many different varieties. I'd like to continue to expand the internationality of it. But what happened was I began to experience more gratitude in my life, more presence in my life. Mm-hmm. And it began to just sort of open me up more to understanding how there is an emotional bond with spirituality, even when the trappings of it appear to be so differential from one person to the next.
Well, one of the things I think that's so interesting about how you felt more gratitude in your life when you started doing the podcast. And one of the things that I thought was particularly interesting in reading the description of the podcast, kind of like Jane is, trying to bring some modern tenets to old stories. You're trying to, find out how stories from the Bible and religion and faith apply to people today. I mean, I thought it was interesting. One of the things that you had told me before was looking for ways that people could identify with the way Jesus's acts in the Bible. For instance, putting other people first. You mentioned in today's world, that would be frontline workers, healthcare professionals, people who sacrifice their lives by exposing themselves to the virus, military professionals from all over, from different countries, sacrificing their lives for the different things that they believe in. So just real quick, kind of tell me how you're able to apply lessons from faith and religion in the Bible and stories from thousands of years ago to what's going on today.
Well, something I think that Jane and I are both focused on is we like the historical Jesus. She does a lot of this in her show. And but I'm sort of challenging myself to try to continue to step outside of my boundaries and see it as a non-faith person. So, you know, how do you look at the resurrection or his death as a non-faith, from a non-faith perspective? And you see him as a radical. You see him as someone who was who wanted to make immediate change in his local community. And then you look around and you see all of these people that are doing asked. And so one thing I talked to you about was, what does it mean to give your life today? Because people are doing that all the time. People are giving their lives. You know, you look at Martin Luther King and the late John Lewis, who didn't die, you know, in the action of what he stood up for. Or you look at, you know, all of the other, you know, you look at immigrants and these are people we talk about, or Alexei Navalny is this person that's been really compelling to me. He isn't dead, but he's in a Siberian prison. He probably will be soon. And it's like, you know, Jesus is obviously, for someone of faith, bigger than life. But there are also people giving their lives all the time for things that, you know, you could say maybe Jesus was doing too. And I'm trying to challenge myself to just be in the present as much as I can, challenge myself to be more loving to the people around me. And I'm not great at it all the time. I don't know what to do with the homeless person on the corner, but I'm trying to figure that out. And talking to people and feeling their struggle helps me understand that.
Yeah, that's so interesting. People, you know, acting out faith when maybe they're not traditional Christians. Maybe they don't know that they're following the Bible, but certainly their acts are very faithful acts today. So interesting. Thank you for that.
Thanks.
Michael, I want to get to you now. Don't want to leave you out there. I know you have a lot to say. So your contribution to the faith discussion is that part of the many things you do, you're a gospel singer. Tell us about that and how you've been able to use that to reach people in a faith-based way.
You know, I have been studying Buddhism for the last 10 years. And I notice when I go back to these spirituals or gospel songs, a lot of times they mention Jesus. And I was talking with some older people, I won't say relatives, but sisters and brothers. And I was asking them, how can you celebrate a religion that was a religion of captivity? And when you go back into the historical nature of slavery, they would actually they would pay these preachers to come and teach the slaves that if they would take things out of context, slaves, be good to your masters, because it says that in the Bible. And as we all know, whatever's in the Bible is true. So, and if you work hard in this life and pay attention to your master, when you get back to your heavenly home, Jesus will welcome you with open arms. And so that is what the slaves were taught. And so you see a lot of people in gospel institutions praising God and whooping and hollering. And sometimes it breaks my heart because a lot of us are still in slavery in a way, especially in this country, which is filled to the brim with abject and utter racism.
Yeah. So interesting. And I know you have something that you want to share with us, something that you've done. I believe it's called a Motherless Child. What is this?
Yes.
Is this a production? What is it that you're going to share with us?
This song is a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. And my mother recently passed, and so I am now officially an orphan. And so it has a great, thank you. It has great resonance to me. Before the death, I would sing this song, and now I sing it, and I just think of all the people who've lost their mother, whether it's someone at the border, one of the immigrants that people are chastising now for being immigrant, but their mother's gone, and they have the same love for their mother. Anyway, these slaves would go out in the fields from sunup to sundown, and they would work, and they would compose these songs. No music paper, no piano, but they would all sing them. And so I've composed this arrangement, sort of in a 19th century feel to it, and added my dear friend Matthew Ian Welch. He's a great videographer, and he has pasted and with his legerdemain and magic, he's made some lovely images. They're not lovely images, but they're pithy and heartfelt. So I'd love for you to watch this.
We'd love to see it.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home.
Wow, Michael, that was just incredible. I feel like we all need to clap.
Oh,
That was
well,
really, really something.
thank you. I feel grateful to be able to share it with you. And, I came upon these, I was always in the suburbs, but I had this connection with my grandmother, who's now gone. And my great grandmother, her mom, lived with us for a long time until she was 96, and then she died. And her mother was a slave in Virginia. Her name was Amanda Wiggins. And I somehow stumbled across, I was in Germany. I was doing a production of Porgy and Bess. And I stumbled across some letters that slaves wrote, actually the original letters, and they're in the Smithsonian Institution. And so I edited a bunch of them together, and a friend of mine in Germany published this book called The Slave Letters. And you can get it on Amazon, except I think they ran out. But anyway, I have one of these letters, and I'd just love to read just a little part of it and give me strength, because even though I've seen these, I've edited them, it cuts out my heart, liver, and spine to think that someone has to beg for the basic human rights that we all have. Or should. This is a letter to Amy Nixon, Edenton, North Carolina, September 13th, 1835. My dear daughter, I have for some time had hope of seeing you once more in this world, but now that hope is entirely gone forever. I expect to start next month for Alabama on the Mississippi River. Perhaps before you get this letter, I may be on my way. My dear daughter Amy, if we never meet in this world, I hope we shall meet in heaven, where we shall part no more. Although we are absent in body, we can be present in spirit. Then let us pray for each other and try to hold out faithful to the end. Your father, brothers, and sisters join me in a great deal of love to you. Farewell, my dear child. I hope the Lord will bless you and your children and enable you to raise them and be comfortable in life, happy in death. And may we all meet around our Father's throne in heaven, never no more to part. From your affectionate mother, Phoebe Brownrigg. That kills me every time. I just don't know what to do with these people who had nothing but this being told that if they kept slaving away, they would meet their heavenly Father in heaven. And as far as I know, nobody came down in a cloud of smoke and ever saved them. They had to work themselves to death, literally. And then they would go buy another Negro, and the process starts over.
It is amazing, though, despite their horrible circumstances, they still had faith and hope that God would save them in the end. And you know, Michael, it was so moving to watch your video clip, and I loved the way you incorporated drawings and real life news video to illustrate what, motherless child. And I think it really, no matter what your politics is, that video really cuts across political lines, because we all have a mother, and so we all are human beings, and we all can relate from that standpoint. And the other thing I wanted to mention was, and I neglected to mention it off the top, but boy, your Broadway chops really came through there. I want to mention you were in Showboat on Broadway and Ragtime and Jesus Christ Superstar. Boy, your Broadway chops really came shining through. Amazing. And I just wanted to ask, where can people find these readings of letters to a slave, the slave letters, excuse me.
Slave letters. Well, as I said, the book is on Amazon. It's The Slave Letters, Michael Connor. And then there's also my website, which is theslaveletters.com. And I'm trying to update it as regularly as I can and have this tapestry. Maybe I'll have a huge quilt soon, and all these different letters accompanied by a spiritual or two. I have a lot of choral pieces also that I have written, and those are published at swirlymusic.org. but there's not a lot of singing going on right now with the pandemic. So, but I appreciate you listening to it, because I think my mission statement in life is to give voice to these people who have been marginalized or put down or shown holding a piece of watermelon and just mocked and scoffed at. And these were real people with families and babies and husbands and wives and hopes and dreams. So I'm trying to say they were here, they lived.
Wow, thank you so much. That's amazing. And I know people will really, I don't know if I want to use the word enjoy, but they will learn something and be inspired through hearing the words that you have in those letters.
Anita, something that Jane said made me almost laugh, because when you say the word God, like Jane said, nobody wants to hear it. And you also, all you have to do is say the word black and or slavery, and you'll see people running so fast.
Well, but I think what's interesting about what you brought up, and it goes back to the church in America and how the instances you brought up of how the church, members of the church in the South in particular, used Jesus or the Gospels as a way to keep people in slavery.
Oh, yeah.
And in the cast for Top Story Tonight, Jesus, is their belief system, Anita, is all over the place, including the woman who plays both Mary, the mother of Jesus, in the Christmas episodes, and then she's Mary Magdalene in the Easter episodes, a wonderful actress named Tanis Paranto. She's an atheist, and a lot of that is because she's Native American, and the church colonial Americans forced Indian children away from their parents, cut their hair, had to go to school, and was going to get the native, the pagan, out of them.
Right.
And this, again, I think is what has been such a challenge to all these things that I would argue is 180 degrees again, opposite of Jesus, even if you don't believe, a lot of people don't even believe he actually existed, but what this person stood for and how it has just been politicized for 2,000 years, whether it's through anti-Semitism or whatever, and it just makes it, it challenges one's own, now I can't believe it. It challenges my own ability to stay true to him, and while being angry and judgmental, and I shouldn't be, judge not or you will be judged, over fellow Christians. And I just think it's particularly the last 4 years has been a real dilemma and has split the church in two.
Yeah.
Jane, when you said something, I'm sorry, Anita.
No, go ahead.
Jane, I just want to come over there and hug you so hard, because the last 4 years, I've been hearing these bizarre horror things. Like, I was looking on Facebook once, and someone really said, it was a Christian evangelical person said, they were preaching about how they'll do anything Jesus says, and if Jesus is for slavery, they'll be for slavery. And 100 people said, yes, he's my Lord. I'll do whatever he says. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm out.
Yeah. Well, people have a lot of strange thoughts and theories about Jesus, right? But Jane, it's hard to be a faithful Christian in many ways, because, like you said, shouldn't be judging people. We need to love our neighbor as ourselves. We need to put God first, right? These are challenges, especially in today's times. In a pandemic, life is so hard. There's a lot to complain about. These are challenges, and so when you cast your players in your podcast, was it hard to find people that wanted to play these roles?
Well, it's funny you should say that because, of course, everybody was out of work last year, as Nicholas can attest to. So they're like, "Oh wow, I can make $300 up. Well, I'll do any, I'll read the lines. They're actors." But what I found, I didn't get any pushback. I had atheist Christians, Jews, maybe I don't know. It was not. It wasn't part of a conversation, although I asked my editor, who is Jewish, and I said, look, are you going to be okay editing this? And she looked at me, she said, I find this fascinating. She wanted to learn about it. Mm-hmm. The most amazing thing that happened to me is when I was trying to cast Jesus. It was very difficult. I didn't want Jesus to be Western European. I even when the Mayflower podcast, I cast Native American actors for the Native American roles, and I couldn't find a Middle Eastern or Israeli actor who was available or interested. It was hard. And through Tanis, the woman who had been in Mayflower and who is an atheist, she said, "Well, I know if you want a Native American Jesus, I'll find one for you." I said, "Well, let me hear some voices." She sent me some voices, and I found this voice, Jason Grazel, and I liked his voice. He had a little bit of an edge. I think he'd make a good Jesus. He agrees to do it. He voices it. After it's over, he tells me, "You're not going to believe this. I'm an actor, but I went to seminary." I said, Jesus went to seminary? I can't believe of course we were meant to work together. He said, "That's not why I took the role. And one reason he went to seminary is because, like Nicholas, he had a lot of questions about his faith and the way he was brought up. And he wanted to go back and ask more questions about it." But I just thought it was little things like that happened along the way in the podcast that made me think I was doing something I hope makes people curious, entertains people, isn't preachy, is funny, and informed. I learned very quickly when you reread the Gospels as a reporter instead of a Christian, it is a completely different experience. It is. You're looking at Jesus now in a whole new way. And that was challenging on its own as well. It's like, wow, this doesn't add up. With my rational mind, this makes no sense to me. And so then you come to this point where are you going to choose to believe this in the face of your rational? Well, yeah, that's what faith is. Right. So that was an interesting experience for me too, is to go back and do all the research on who Herod really was, who Pontius Pilate really was, and any references to a man named Jesus outside the Bible, and there are a few. It was a fascinating research endeavor, if nothing else.
Well, I love your curious mind, Jane, and it's just so awesome. And Nick, I wanted to ask you, in the same way that Jane wanted to provide people with information who might be curious about Jesus and faith and the Bible. I know you're doing sort of the same thing, but you're a working actor. You're on some top shows. You named them at the top of the broadcast here. Were you worried at all that you might be typecast or stereotyped? Were you worried at all about any backlash from doing a religious podcast with the name God in it?
I think it's a very good question. And I think that I think I'd be lying. I think I'd be disingenuous if I didn't say I sometimes wonder how people are receiving it. But I think if they're forming a judgment of it, it's because they haven't listened, would be my feeling. I do think that I'm very, very grateful that I have, and I'm not saying this just because I live with her. I love my wife very much. One of the reasons is she has empowered me to truly follow my artistic desires and impulses. In the same way that I think if there's anything that the commonality of this show, and frankly, Anita, we've been talking so much, you should be talking a little bit too about yours, but I'm so impressed by watching Michael and watching Jane follow the thing that is pulling their soul out of them forward. Mm-hmm. And I have only begun to follow this road. And frankly, if some people are not interested in it, what the hell can I do about that? You know, I don't know. I know that what I'm doing is I am enriching myself with some amazing deepening of relationships in my life, people that I've held on to through projects that I've done because we were friends and we connected. But now I get an hour of listening to their story and they tell me, like Jane talking about this beautiful experience she had when she was there when her mother died, took her last breath. You can listen to it on the podcast. It's this extraordinary thing. I would have never gotten
me
that
cry.
from Jane. I would have never gotten it from Jane. And I hope I get the chance to talk to both you and Michael on my show. Frankly, I hope you'll both do me the honor. I will see. I'll find you.
I would love it.
I would love that.
It is just to say that I've had the thought, but at the end of the day, we cannot please everyone. And so I need to make sure that I'm following my own artistic compass. And I know that when I'm having these conversations, I'm a happier person and that it is having an effect on those people that listen. Do I get millions of listeners? No, but I have people that respond to me and say, thank you for being so open and for giving me an opportunity to listen to people really trying to grasp something very difficult. That's really rewarding to me.
Well, you know, you cannot be successful in anything unless you are truly passionate about it. So that's the key right there.
So true.
Let me go around. I want to go around the screen here, and I want to ask you quickly, what is the number one thing you learned about yourself from doing these kinds of projects? And Jane, I'll start with you.
I'll say twofold. On a faith part, I learned what I alluded to earlier is that faith really is without rationality. You just have to believe. And I've learned to, I'm still working on the leap of faith, but I've learned to embrace it. But on a practical sense, I learned over the last year, like I think so many other people have, several new skills. I mean, I wrote the thing, I cast it, I directed it, I produced it, I did 90% of the editing, all with people in 24 different home studios in their closets with different ambient sound.
Incredible.
To mix that. And what I really got out of it is, embrace the scariness. I mean, just go out and learn new things and do new things. It's been wonderful for my confidence and my sense of I can do anything, that kind of thing.
You can, Jane Wells. I know you, and you can do anything.
Oh, you.
Okay, Michael, this is such a heartfelt, personal project for you. I mean, you've done some huge productions on Broadway and other things, but this is a really personal project. So what has it taught you about yourself?
It has taught me that I am part of a story that is not finished yet. Mm-hmm. And it's taught me to be proud of where I came from and who I came through to get here. And I hear these voices of my ancestors, and I'm so proud of them because I don't know, because I think of this all the time. When I get a flat tire, or when the plumbing backs up, when something horrible happens, I'm just like, I'm so mad. And yet, my ancestors couldn't get mad. They just had to be intrepid, never give up. And so it's taught me a lot about never giving up and being proud of my people. And I'm part of this opera that is an accident of birth, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Wow. Well, you think you're proud of your ancestors. They are proud of you. Okay.
Yeah.
They are proud of you.
My granny's right here.
And Nicholas, how about you? What have you learned through this latest endeavor?
Well, I want to just sort of second what they both said. It's, you know, they've each in their own ways. I can connect with what both of them said. So there's a lot of learning that comes with it. I mean, one thing that really stands out, I feel compelled to say, is that for a long time growing up, I didn't think of myself as a very smart child. I don't know why. I could psychoanalyze that, but I do that with a therapist anyway. We need a lot more time. But one thing I always did was I was compelled to ask people what they thought about things. And it was recent. It was only during this process that I began to understand the power of giving someone space. I'd sort of been doing it unconsciously for a long time, but when you truly give someone space to speak, as you have given us here, Anita, there's such an innate gratitude that the speaker has for you when you give a space that is non-judgmental. People are really so much more willing to be open than we think that they might be. And so I've really been very happy knowing that if I can continue to go down a road of giving others space and finding people around me that provide me that space, like my happiness quotient really goes up.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting when someone you're interviewing trusts you. It's interesting the things that they'll say. Their truth comes out, and you never know who's going to hear it, and it's going to really be meaningful for someone. So that's interesting. Okay, one more question around the screen here, and then we're going to wrap things up for today. Just a quick answer here. What's the one thing you want people to take away from your project, Jane?
Curiosity about Jesus and what he really stood for.
Okay, and quickly, let's give you a plug. Where can people find your podcast?
It's on every Top Story Tonight. Jesus, anywhere you get your podcast, that's where it is.
Okay, fantastic. Michael, you next.
I just want people to take away the richness and the grandeur of the story of African Americans in America.
Okay, fantastic. Nicholas?
I would like people to take away the emotional through line that we all share as we struggle to understand the world around us, even though the way that comes out to express itself might look very different. The commonality within us all is this desire to connect with the world around us. And I think you can find that kind of universality in the show. Fantastic.
Where can people find it?
Yeah, like Jane, you can find it on any podcast platform. You can go to nicholasdegusto.com without the apostrophe. And so you can find it anywhere.
Okay. And Michael, I didn't get to ask you where people can find your project. Amazon, you said?
No, Amazon is for the book, The Slave Letters.
Okay.
And if you want to see more of The Slave Letters, it's at theslaveletters.com.
Theslaveletters.com. Okay,
Yeah.
Very good. And are you going to sing for us, Michael?
Yes.
You are? Okay.
Well, only if you sing with me.
Okay. Are we ending the show with Michael singing? Is that what we're doing? Producers in the booth? I think so.
Well, we do have 30 seconds more of that piece of that piece that I wrote, the Child of Walker by Moonlight, if you want to hear 30 seconds.
Yeah, let's hear that first. Let's go ahead and hear that first. Lovely. Wow, that's so moving. I love the way you use real life pictures. It really makes it seem more authentic and so moving and something everyone can connect to. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Michael.
Thank you.
All right, guys, this has been so fascinating. I have really enjoyed it so much, and I really have enjoyed hearing about all of your interesting projects. Makes me want to go and look them all up after the show. And just a little tease here for you guys. On the side, I'm working on my own faith-based project. So maybe we'll have a show about that another time. I'll share that with you off camera.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Good.
Please talk about it on my podcast.
Okay. You got it. That's Thank you guys so much. I want everyone to know in our audience that 4 at 4 is becoming live at 5 on March 31st. We're going to have Jerry Sullivan. He is the former editor of the Orange County Register and the Los Angeles Business Journal. He is host of the popular online forum Sullivan Says. He will be hosting at 5 p.m. Wednesday, March 31st. He is great, and you don't want to miss that. All right. We want to also mention to tune into peoplemedia.live for more interesting shows like this. Okay, Michael, this is what we've all been waiting for. We're going to hear you sing live. You are going to sing us out, my friend. Thank you again.
Nicholas, Jane, Anita, you better help me.
I'll lip sync.
I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine.
I'm gonna let it shine.
This little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine.
Yay. Thank you so much.